Let's get right into another challenge in the 7 Caillou series, parts of a list. Write a function part list that gives all the ways to divide a list, an array, of at least 2 elements into 2 non-empty parts. Each 2 non-empty parts will be in a pair or an array. If necessary, each part will be in a string, and elements of a pair must be in the same order as in the original array. And so that bit simplifies things a bit. You don't have to worry about all the different permutations. You'll see from this example below that it's pretty simple to figure out how many results you're going to get from this. It's basically going to work by, you'd start with just taking the first element, pairing that with everything else. Then it will go to the first 2 elements and the last 3, the first 3 and the last 2, then the first 4 and the last 1. And that should be clear that if you took all 5, there'd be nothing left to pair with, and the rule said that we had to have pairs. So hopefully you can see that, and you can scroll here. In the case of an input size of 5, you're going to have 4 different pairs. And that'll always be the length of the input array minus 1. If you want to sketch out some more examples with different sized arrays to convince yourself of that, go ahead. Otherwise, we will proceed. Okay, so you know what to do. Pause it, try your best, and then come on back when you're ready. If you're having a little trouble, notice that in C# we have this concept of, right here, this would be a jagged array, which is like an array of arrays. And there's also the concept of a multidimensional array. So here they're specifying a jagged array, and we'll look real quick about that. You should read this page. It's going to touch on both, but really quick. A jagged array is an array whose elements are arrays, possibly of different sizes. That part's the big catch, possibly of different sizes. When you go with the multidimensional array, those array elements are going to be the same size. So we don't really need that feature for our challenge, all the elements, because remember, everything we're inserting is a pair. So we only need a size 2 for everyone, but for whatever reason, they want us to use a jagged array, so we'll use that. But this is nice. It shows you how to initialize that. We will use this, of course, with strings. And then it points out how, because notice you don't specify the size here because they can be different, right? You can't just put one number because they could be different. They don't have to be, but they could be. So then you're sort of tasked with, for each element that's an array, you have to initialize it and size it to your needs. So, and then, yeah, you can, we don't need this part, but feel free to keep reading about that. And then they link to multidimensional arrays down here, but we're not going to do that here. I just want you to know the difference up front. If you're having trouble with syntax and getting a bunch of errors, you might be using the multidimensional array in a way that you weren't expecting. So that could be a little hint if you got stuck and made it this far without pausing. So that said, going to use this. You can even copy this and we'll just repurpose it, right? Okay, yes, we know it's our code. So of course, in our case, we're working with strings, and I don't know if I'll just call mine result. I often do that. And so we already talked about the size for ours will be based on the array length, and it's -1. Array length -1. And then we don't specify this. We'll initialize each entry as we construct it. So you can imagine we're going to iterate over the input array length, and ++I. And again, -1, we don't need to process the whole array. we're going to come up one short. We already talked about how many elements there are. So, and you could even factor this out, right, from here and here. You can make an integer variable that held that if you wanted to. So otherwise you'd overrun the bounds of the array, right, if you didn't have that -1 here as well. Those should be the same. So I suppose you could also refer to the result variable for its length. But anyway, we'll get on with it. I'm going to also create a local integer variable here that I'll call index. That's going to sort of help us make sure as we build these entries, these array entries, that we're placing them in the right spot for our result. The first one, we'll start at index 0, then 1, etc. Okay, good. So next, let's go ahead and initialize the element array. So result index, it'll start with a value of 0. And then we're just going to make a new string array because we know all the elements of a jagged array are an array. And we know its size too, that's fixed. If you don't like the magic number there, you could create a local variable here, a constant or something, and give it a text name if you didn't like to. So good. We have a new array. We can actually populate it now, right? So we're going to have two parts. We're going to start basically grabbing the first half, making a string out of it, grab the second half and make a string out of it. Remember, they're supposed to be individual strings, so that's no problem when you only have one string, but when we combine 4 strings, we just got to make sure we're putting them all into one string. So it'd be Toto space Picaro space zone space Kiwi, all in one set of double quotes. So to do that, we can use we'll use some link methods here to achieve this. I'll say string, just call it S1, and I can say string class. Remember, it has a join method. We've seen that before. And in our case, we want them separated by spaces. So that's the delimiter I'm providing. And then which part of the array? Well, to start, I'm going to take the left half, right? And we know link gives us this take method that will start taking any number of elements right from the beginning of the collection. I'm just going to go ahead and bring in link now before I get yelled at. I have an abusive relationship with the compiler. So take, now what do we want? Do we want to put I there? Well, no, because I is going to be 0 to start, right? That's going to be take nothing, and that's not going to be very good for our first string. So I'll say I plus 1. And hopefully that's clear. The first time around it'll be 1. When this index gets updated to 1, it'll be 2, right? And the second time we do in fact want to take 2, then I'll go to take 3, take 4, and we'll be done. So that should be clear. So we got our left half of our string, right? So we can go ahead, we could add that now or later. You could say result index 0, right? The first half, there's 2, remember we specified 2. So we're gonna have a 0 and a 1 equals this S1 string. So we got our left half added. Now we can do essentially the same thing, but a little bit different. String S2 equals string join again. There could be multiple words present. We're going to combine them into a single string. And instead of take this time, remember the other one to sort of, that's like take, you sometimes see them combined if you want a subset of an array or a collection, and that is skip, right? That's going to tell us, give us an offset that we can start taking elements from, and it will just take everything after whatever index we provided. So what would make sense for that? Well, again, I plus 1, right? And think about that. What would that mean here when I is 0? It would say skip 1, right? I is 0 plus 1 is 1. So it's saying skip 1, the first element, and start with Toto. And it's going to grab everything, as long as your array is. So that's cool. That gives us the right half. You can think of take right from the beginning, skip, take everything to the right. Grab the left, grab the right. And then we can add that. Index 1. Remember, we got 2 spots there we defined. And you could have put these 2 statements together if you wanted, if you like how that looks better, that's fine too. And then finally, what we have to make sure we're doing, we get in trouble if we don't update this index every time, right? So I'm going to be a little bit fancy here. I'm going to use the postfix increment operator, which will guarantee that my statement gets executed first, then I'll increment. Obviously, I wouldn't want to go to 1 before firing this off. And if this part is scary to you, you can always just go on the next line, you know what I mean? But I can save a line of code, so I'll do that. Just know though, you can't use the pre here, right? This will increment index first and then execute the statement. So don't fall into that trap. Okay, so what did we do here? Each time we're initializing the array element that's going to be placed in, which is very important because that's not defined for us. So we got to initialize that, set that memory up. Then we calculate the left string, calculate the right string, and then go ahead and throw them in their corresponding places. And this will go through array length -1 times. Perfect. That should be what we want. So finally, by the end, I think we're safe to return our result. And then I'll go ahead and run a test. Okay, we got a problem, cannot convert type into bool, and that's on line 10, right? It's telling us line 10. And, oh sure, wow, I really biffed a for loop there. Okay, I is less than, right? We need some kind of, it doesn't make sense just to put a number there, right? Array length -1 is just some number. This is a Boolean, right? That I is less than that, so yeah. Okay, string does not exist in the current context. What I do, maybe I need the using system. How about that? And if you didn't know that, you can go to the string class, see namespace system. So I know I need using system for that. And while we're here, joins here if you want to refresh yourself on that, how it places a character between elements that you want. So yeah, we're green. That looks pretty good to me. Nice and simple. Of course, if you wanted to, you could put console write line kind of statements. If you run into trouble, remember to use those to find out where you're going off the rails. Yeah, the big thing is, it maybe tripped you up, is not knowing about jagged and multidimensional arrays. One thing I'll add about this too is that don't go crazy here. I wouldn't go beyond two dimensions, or maybe 3, but it gets pretty hard to visualize, to think about that. At least my brain hurts if you go beyond that. I suspect it's that way for many others too. You want to start looking into making your own classes and collections if you find yourself getting into that scenario where you don't want to just keep chaining these things, So yeah, read up on jagged arrays, multidimensional, figure out the difference, how you might use them differently. But yeah, I'll go ahead and submit. Grab those honor points and then check it out. Yeah, this guy went full on link mode. Looks pretty similar, right, to what we did string join with a take and with a skip. So you can kind of see that in full link glory. Same kind of deal. Got it on one line. Yeah. Let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another challenge.